I just want to start by saying I am one of, I think, the 40% or so that this is their first time here. Can't believe I haven't been here before, but it's been incredibly valuable for me. I've learned a lot. And I think you said, Keith, that this was the event that you created, the event that you wanted to attend when you created it. And I think you and the rest of the organizers definitely have achieved that. So for those who don't know who I am, I'm Kevin Robinson, the CEO of the Wi-Fi Alliance. I am new to the role, but I'm not new to the organization. I've been there for over 15 years now. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, one, how I see Wi-Fi Alliance evolving over time and engaging more broadly with the ecosystem, but also some of the developments that we're working on right now that ultimately I think are going to impact your community. So personally, these were some of the immediate priorities that I established for the organization when I came in. We're going to focus more deeply on the broad ecosystem engagement one, but as you've probably gathered from a lot of the discussions so far, 6 gigahertz is a pretty big deal for the industry, right? And so in 2023, there's going to be a huge focus on harmonized global spectrum, turning that map that was up earlier from having some of those patchy 6 gigahertz availability to being really the entire spectrum globally. Another item was around the Alliance being a little bit more nimble. Right now, I mean, we're in our DNA. We have a lot of, let's say, standards folks, and we can get very hamstrung by process and just doing things in a very deliberate way, which is good. In fact, we'll address some of the areas where maybe we haven't done that in the past, but it also means that we aren't always moving at the rate of innovation for the industry and what the industry ultimately needs. And so what I think you can expect to see is an alliance that is evolving in how we actually do what we do, so that we're delivering the right technologies that work as they should to the industry. And we're going to jump a bit into the one around broad ecosystem engagement, because I think that's one that has a lot of relevance to this audience. We have a very far-reaching ecosystem, right? I mean, everything from the silicon vendors all the way down through the entire value chain, the OEMs, ODMs, integrators, service providers, many of you, professionals in the industry. But we've been really very siloed in how we've operated. And so I think there's a disconnect, particularly with this community, and that we're hoping to address. So overall, I think as an organization, we're really going to be pursuing those conversations with the ecosystem at all levels of companies. Making sure that we're tied into the product management teams. We're tied in communities like this, as well as our more traditional audiences. So let's see. I think overall, though, the key takeaway here is that we all have a role to play in making this industry successful. And Wi-Fi Alliance, we certainly want to see how we can be an enabler in doing that. So that brings me to kind of the new chapter for the Alliance, at least in my perspective. And that is really a chapter where in order to more broadly address the ecosystem, that we're having much greater increased engagement with the Wi-Fi professional community. And frankly, I think just our presence at the event this particular instance is just the beginning of that. And I think you're going to expect to see a lot more of us in the future. So I'm going to go through some numbers here just very briefly, and some of these are probably repeats, having been here for the past 2 days. But Wi-Fi is frankly the foundational connectivity technology for the world, right? And Wi-Fi certified and Wi-Fi in general, what we do in the Alliance, really drives this global ubiquity. Again, here are the numbers. We've shipped 39 billion products over our lifetime, 18 billion still in active use. And we're dropping another almost 4.5 billion products into the market every single year. So that's good, right? Now, of course, I think many of you out in the audience are the ones who are maybe dealing with some of the pain involved with those 18 billion legacy devices that are maybe 10 plus years old. But it's also a good opportunity because when you look at we are one of the most recognized technologies in the world. And this is an industry that is growing. It's one that's moving into new use cases, solving new challenges for businesses around the world. And ultimately, I mean, that's, people often ask me, how are you doing? And I say, well, I'm really busy. Well, it's good to be busy. It's good to be needed. It's good to have a lot going on in terms of, your professional career and satisfaction and all of that. And the Wi-Fi industry is certainly a place that you're going to get that. So I'm going to hit on some of the areas that we're working at a high level. And then I'll get into 3 in particular that I think we'll dive a little bit deeper on. But 2023, it's a year full of opportunities for the industry. Of course, Wi-Fi certified is an essential piece in driving market penetration. It always has been. It kind of serves as that inflection point for mass market adoption. People have been talking about Wi-Fi 7 and when will we really see it? Well, frankly, when Wi-Fi certified is available for Wi-Fi 7, that's going to be one of the key markers of when you really see, not the early adopters, but when you really see mass market adoption. But there's another critical piece around Wi-Fi certified. And that is the importance of actually maintaining the strength of this brand. I know we're often the victims of our own success, right? You all may know the reality of this, but a lot of people will just say, well, Wi-Fi just works, right? It works good enough. And so we're kind of a victim of that as an industry. And so, again, maintaining the strength of this brand is critical in that, again, it's an inflection point for mass adoption, but it's also a vehicle, a tool that we as an industry can use to solve some of the challenges we're facing right now, and frankly, some of the challenges that I've heard about over the last day and a half. So again, we'll maybe talk a bit more about that later. But then, of course, in the area, so we talked about market penetration, the area of security, of course, privacy is something we're looking at, greater privacy in how Wi-Fi works. Staying ahead of evolving threats. A lot of people may not know this, but Wi-Fi Alliance is often very involved in the early embargo periods with security researchers. And so we make it a point as we are involved in those incident responses, are there things that we can start rolling back into the Wi-Fi certified program so that we're catching things and we're not carrying those issues forward? And that's kind of an ongoing activity. As you all know, the work environment is now kind of moving out from the traditional carpeted enterprise to now it's your home, right? I'm working from home 2 days a week. I'm sure many of you who are in the office at all are still doing a hybrid environment. And I'm sure that it is creating increased challenges for you as you're extending that enterprise network potentially into the home. And so there's things that we can be doing there from an experience standpoint, and again, making that an extension of the enterprise. New spectrum, again, 6 gigahertz harmonization. I'll touch on this again on the next slide, but this is, again, it's the most significant allocation of spectrum to Wi-Fi ever. It's probably going to be the biggest allocation we get in the foreseeable future. Yes, we're looking into 7 and things like that, but it's going to be nothing like the 1200 megahertz that we got. And so it's essential that we as an industry fully capitalize on that. And then in the area of what we call kind of new frontiers, obviously programs like Wi-Fi 7 in development, the AR, VR, XR, some of it's hype, but some of it is very real and it is going to be coming. Things around seamless roaming and consistency of expectations. So now these are the 3 I want to spend a little bit more time on. The first one is around consistency of experience and predictability of networks, which is probably the bane of all of your existence, right? Is how do we get more determinism out of Wi-Fi? How do we get more consistency out of how client devices perform? And there's a few things that we're doing around this. One is something that's a little bit more focused on the service providers, but something called Wi-Fi data elements that is standardizing essentially the data model for how you report up metrics on access points, but also eventually getting into clients. So there's actually a standardized mechanism for clients to report what they're seeing and having that done in a multi-vendor interoperable way. But then probably the more significant departure from what we've done in the past is getting into more performance testing. And this is new. We had something called Voice Enterprise. It's been around for years, and yes, it did do a level of performance testing, but it was only for a single application, if you want to think of it that way, right? So it was looking at roaming performance, et cetera. Well, with a new program we call Wi-Fi device metrics, we've actually standardized how you go about testing certain key performance metrics for Wi-Fi devices. So, you have all vendors and any test labs all doing it the same way, so you have more of an apples-to-apples comparison between devices, or between those devices. Now, what it doesn't do, however, is set what the criteria are. What is the pass criteria? And part of the reason for that is we're a very diverse industry. We cut horizontal through a lot of different horizontals, and not every device needs to meet the same criteria. But at least you have a framework for how to test in a consistent way. And then vendors, or say customers, whether it's a service provider or even in the enterprise, can say, okay, for the applications I'm doing, for my vertical, this is what I need. And they can just kind of fill it in, and now you have a standard way of approaching that. So it's new, it's a bit of a shift for us, but I think it's going to be very powerful in moving forward in how we drive greater consistency across devices. On Wi-Fi generations, there has been a lot said about this, so I'm probably going to skip over that one since, it would be very repetitive at this point. Expansion into 6 gigahertz. So yes, there's the benefit, obviously, to the industry of getting this new spectrum. We have LPI available now. In most places, it's just the lower part of the band, the 500 megahertz. Of course, there is the challenges right now in the pushback from some of the cellular community to allocate that upper 500 for IMT, for cellular. So this is going to be a significant, I'll say it, fight, right, for the Wi-Fi industry and for the unlicensed community. And of course, Wi-Fi Alliance is kind of in the lead on that. But the other piece that's somewhat interesting is Wi-Fi Alliance itself, if you noticed it on an earlier presentation, is one of the AFC operators. With our goal really being, how do we drive mass adoption of standard power 6 gigahertz devices? When we were looking at the landscape, and when many of our members were looking at the landscape, I think there were some concerns that was not going to come to fruition without an organization like the Alliance involved. And so we're actually standing up our own AFC, which will be able to serve that mass market opportunity for 6 gigahertz in standard power. Okay, so these are, obviously, these are some of the segments. You can argue whether all these kind of roll up under enterprise or what have you. But there are, a number of segments that we're definitely paying attention to. So healthcare, retail, education, industrial manufacturing, and enterprise. And we have a number of programs that are relevant to these segments. Again, I'm going to avoid kind of going through the generational piece because it's been touched on quite a bit. But the one I do want to highlight is around Wi-Fi 6. There's a lot said about the challenges faced with IoT devices, particularly ones that are being brought into the enterprise. And one of the encouraging things that we're seeing is a heightened interest in IoT device vendors, including consumer IoT devices, in making the migration to Wi-Fi 6. As you know, most of these are still on Wi-Fi 4, which is 2009, right? Anyway, years and years. It's been a long time. So when I first got to the Alliance was when the draft 2.0 came out. But we are now starting to see some traction in moving that into Wi-Fi 6 and beyond. But I do want to spend a little bit of time around Wi-Fi QoS management. Because this is, and again, an important piece into that consistency of behavior, where this new program allows the prioritization of traffic flows, and specifically has 4 capabilities. And really a lot of this has to do with the mapping of DSCP to the over-the-air interface, right? And so we have stream classification service. One interesting one is around mirrored stream classification service, where a client device can actually get the AP to give it a certain stream classification by mirroring it, so you don't necessarily need to have a lot of the intelligence at other levels. But ultimately, this brings standardization and consistency in how those mappings happen, so you can get more of an end-to-end quality of service. So I think Wi-Fi Alliance interaction with this community can provide critical insights for the Wi-Fi evolution over the next decade. And in particular, one thing I want to just very briefly mention, so when you look at how the organization does its resourcing, much of it is member-driven, right? But many people don't know that the staff organization actually has its own carve-out for resourcing to do development, that we call, which is a sustaining track, where, and I bring that up because the insights that my colleagues at Consuelo and others get when they're out in the market, we as a staff organization actually have a level of autonomy and power to fast track items that we think need to be addressed for the industry. And so that's why I think bringing these insights in from this community into the Alliance, whether it's through our PMs or a more formalized engagement with companies that are represented out here, has the ability to really change what we can come to expect from Wi-Fi. Further, I think on the flip side, Wi-Fi Alliance providing greater transparency of what we're doing to this community, I think can help provide opportunities to, one, let us know where we're getting it wrong, let us know the challenges we're going to be facing in those new technologies coming to market, and again, ultimately driving greater success of Wi-Fi. So you should expect to see my team here on a more regular basis. Please make an opportunity to grab us in the hallway, tell us kind of what is going on, what is concerning you in your day-to-day. And then in closing, I know we're often in the details of these types of events, but I hope nobody comes away from an event like this without recognizing the importance of Wi-Fi, that it is kind of the glue that holds much of society together. Your personal connections, economies, corporate operations. And again, it's in kind of noise when you're in it day to day. You don't realize that is what is making this world go. And you all out in this audience are the ones that ultimately make it work, right? So again, thank you all. I hope you appreciate the unique role you play. And I look forward to further engagement in the future.